So one of the probably the biggest difficulties that people have in understanding research and how research works, it's the idea that research does not prove, and research has never proven anything. Research does not study proof. Research does try to explain whether one thing causes another, but it does it through what we call a probabilistic model of causation. In other words, research cannot tell us that if one thing happens, the other thing is automatically going to happen. It can't guarantee that things are going to happen. It basically says, though, that it's more likely for those things to occur. So what research does is it studies relationships between variables, and then it tries to basically explain how likely. Now, some things may be 99.99% likely. When we look at, for example, birth control methods, there's research that shows, yeah, if you use this birth control in a certain way, you've got a huge likelihood of doing that. But again, research is not able to predict that one person that uses birth control in a certain way will have a certain outcome. It's just going to give you the likelihood of that happening. So that's important. Again, you see this kind of depicted here because that means that we talk about correlations, we talk about things being connected. We don't talk about, it's very difficult to say that that one thing causes another. So, for example, one of the things that is important to understand, for example, is just the element of time. You've got two different kinds of studies. The categories of the study are not as important right now. You'll look at this in a different chapter. But for example, there's a type of study that looks at different groups of people, and it asks, for example, collects data from them at the same time. So you might go and collect test scores from 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders all in one day. Then there's a type of study that collects, for example, tests from 6th graders one year, the next group of 6th graders, or then it'll follow them the next year when they're 7th graders, collect more information the next year, they'll become 8th graders, and it gets information again. And so this takes one group of people and it tracks them over time. So why does that matter? Well, one of the things that we're talking about is often research really is interested in looking at proving that one thing happened. So it's maybe interesting, yeah, to say if I did counseling with this person, their self-esteem increased, but wouldn't you love to know that there's no other explanation for it, that that you can be pretty certain that if their self-esteem increased, it was because of you and not because they happened to, for example, get into a new relationship during the time that they were with you. So causation, the idea that your independent variable actually causes your dependent variable, has three important things. So one is A has to come before B. That's important over here, where certain studies you don't examine time, right? And so in longitudinals you can't examine time. You also have to know that they're correlated. So if I do counseling and self-esteem doesn't change, well, that it doesn't happen. Or if self-esteem changes and I didn't do anything, well, maybe that wasn't the factor either, right? And then you have to be able to rule out all those other explanations. So make sure you understand that. This is, again, one of the most poorly understood concepts of research. Think about this comic and, again, how it kind of tries to break that down. So we then get into understanding the two major pockets of research and how it breaks down as far as the type of data we're collecting. So quantitative research usually has to do with, a big surprise, quantities. So it's looking at numbers, it's looking at data, looking at statistics. This is deductive, right? So in quantitative research, you have a theory already, you're trying to prove it, so you want to get those numbers to back it up. It has specific steps, which is probably what we're focusing on this class. It's really more following this process. And again, it's mostly numeric. It's a pretty big samples of people, so you can kind of prove those relationships. And here's an example, for example, that polls about politics are one of the best examples you can think of right now. Qualitative research, on the other hand, usually has to do with interviews and focus groups. It's the quality. It's really digging into stuff. This is inductive. So I don't know what the theory is. I want to go and do interviews and get a lot of information about what's happening to try to figure that out. So here, you really don't build a theory until the very end. After you've gathered data, you've kind of figured out what those concepts are. So it's kind of a backwards process compared to quantitative. And here, you're not interested in how many people as much as you're interested in how the richness, the depth, capturing all the many facets of somebody. So these are 2-hour, 3-hour long plus focus groups. These are observational studies. These are the ethnographic research where you live with a culture for months or years. And so 2 different types of research, but both important steps of the research process, just like we've seen before. Quantitative methods help you test your theory, collect data for it, and qualitative methods help you organize your evidence and try to organize it and refine your theory or develop new theories.